You have everything most people can only dream of in their entire lives. A private jet that glides like a silver bird, designer clothes that smell of real leather, and a last name so powerful that every door opens before you even knock. But inside, you're rotting, not in a loud, dramatic way. In a slow, quiet one, failing test after test, drifting through class after class in silence, staying up night after night, not knowing why the emptiness won't go away. You're sinking, in silence, and no one reaches out to save you. Everyone's given up, the teachers, the friends, even your father. Until one day, an entirely ordinary day, in the quietest corner of the school hallway, a janitor, a black woman no one's ever really looked in the eye, speaks. A simple sentence, but heavier than any lecture you've ever heard. You thought she was just the lady who mops the floors, but she's about to wipe clean everything you thought you knew. Before the story begins, if you believe every voice deserves to be heard, especially the one society ignores, hit that subscribe button and comment. I'm listening. Your name is Lucas Reed, the only son of Charles Reed, a tech mogul whose name appears on the cover of Forbes as often as the weather changes. You grew up with private jets, a personal chef, and birthday parties that featured actual celebrities. But amid all the glitz, one thing was missing: meaning. You were the son of a great man, but you were never yourself. At 17, you attended one of Atlanta's most prestigious private high schools. Not because you were gifted, but because your last name was a golden ticket. No entrance exams, no interviews, just a timely bank transfer, and a family name did the rest. In marble hallways lined with portraits of alumni success stories, you were known for three things: arrogance, expensive clothes, and a catastrophic academic record. Teachers passed you not because you earned it, but because they were afraid. Afraid of losing funding from the Reed family. And you? You didn't care. Why should grades matter when one day you'd own an entire corporation? You mocked teachers, ignored classmates, sat in class like someone who didn't belong, and didn't bother pretending otherwise. Once, when called into the counselor's office for spiraling, you leaned back in your chair, arms crossed, and said bluntly, "I could buy this school if I wanted to. What difference does a grade make?" That line spread through the school like wildfire, but no one dared talk back. From students to teachers, everyone avoided you, not out of respect, but because no one wanted to touch the power of the Reed name. At home, things were even colder. Your father, Charles, was a man carved from cold steel, logical, detached, and convinced there was no room for weakness, not even from his son. "You're a disgrace," he growled one night after yet another call from school. "If you worked for me, I would have fired you already." You folded your arms, eyes drifting toward the ceiling. "But I don't work for you. I'm your son," he sneered. "The world doesn't care about that. You're going to have to. Choose. Become somebody, or stay a useless rich kid coasting on his last name. And I'm not carrying you anywhere." Silence hit like a punch to the chest. Charles wasn't joking. And you knew it. The next morning, you still went to school like nothing happened. You drove your sleek Audi, last year's birthday gift, into the faculty lot, striding through the hallways like a runway model. Some students looked at you with awe, others with contempt, but only one pair of eyes never left you. A pair belonging to an older black woman mopping the side hallway. She stood tall, her gaze calm but razor sharp. Her uniform was wrinkled, but her presence was not. You didn't notice her. To you, she was background noise part of the familiar setting, like the school bell, like the photocopier, invisible. But when your grades kept falling, when test results came back bleeding red, when your father finally cut all your cards, took the car, and made you ride the bus like a regular person, things started to shift. One freezing morning, you dragged yourself in through the back entrance. Your expensive shoes were muddy, your breath visible in the air. She was still there. Same figure, same mop, same solemn silence. But this time, she whispered a sentence almost like she was talking to herself, but just loud enough for you to hear. True wisdom is knowing you know nothing. Her words echoed off the cold, damp tiles, dissolving into the air like morning mist, soft but lingering. You paused for just a second, barely. Just enough for your shoulder to shift, your neck to tilt slightly, your eyes to squint, half surprised, half skeptical. You turned. Chestnut hair misted with dew, your expensive leather jacket darkened at the sleeves by rain. She kept mopping. Didn't look up, didn't explain, didn't ask for acknowledgement. Just a steady rhythm, carving arcs into the tile like she was writing something with that old mop. What did you say? You asked, your voice a little higher than usual. Maybe something had been touched, something you hadn't realized was there. She stopped, leaned the mop against the wall, and looked up at you. Eyes deep brown, steady, like they'd seen too. Much disappointment to flinch anymore. Nothing, she said. Just, you're not ready to understand. You half smirked. Not quite a laugh, not quite disdain. Somewhere between confusion and curiosity and a question newly planted. You walked away, but all day, her words echoed in your head like an unshakable hum. True wisdom is knowing you know nothing. It didn't sound like anything you'd heard before, and it definitely wasn't something a janitor was supposed to say. You'd heard your principal spout cliches, like be the best version of yourself. You'd heard your dad deliver lectures like earnings reports. Short, cold, and focused on ROI. But no one, not a single person, had told you that knowing nothing could be a sign of wisdom. That night, you lay in bed, the blue light of your phone casting shadows across your cheek as you scrolled through empty party texts, smug photos, and unread messages from your father. Her sentence still sat there, motionless, like a pebble stuck in your shoe small, but impossible to forget. Next day, it was still raining. For the first time in months, you showed up to school, not looking like you were walking a runway. You walked from the bus stop, jacket soaked, hair stuck to your forehead. No one recognized you. No one greeted you. And you didn't care if they did. You walked the back hallway, the one you usually avoided because it passed the maintenance room, always damp and cold. But today, you went through it on purpose. Not because it was quicker, but because ... she was still there. Just like before. Like she'd never left. Like the world outside never slowed her down. You stopped again. She looked up, this time not, waiting for you to ask. You came back, she said evenly. Don't know why, you replied. Then, almost disbelieving yourself, I just wanted to hear you say one more thing. She nodded gently, like she'd been expecting that answer. She stood upright, rag still in hand. You ever read Socrates? She asked. You shook your head. Then start there. "You're a janitor," you said, not hiding your curiosity. "How do you know this stuff?" "Because I used to teach." "It," she said, her eyes unchanged. "Once, but I stayed silent too long in a meeting where I should have spoken up. And now I'm here." You looked at her like you were seeing her for the first time. Not the uniform, not the mop, not the role she had to play every day in this school. "You used to be a teacher?" "Professor," she corrected gently. "English lit and philosophy." Silence filled the space. For the first time, you had nothing to say. "Teach me," you whispered. "It won't be easy," she said. "I won't teach you how to get an A. I'll teach you how to ask yourself a question the world doesn't want you to ask. Who am I? Really, when there's nothing left to brag about?" You nodded. Something inside you stirred, not loud, but real, like a current deep beneath the ocean floor. "So, how do we start?" you asked, your shoulders lifting slightly, like you were trying to hide the fact that you cared. Evelyn looked at you, but didn't answer right away. She bent down, opened a drawer beneath her janitor cart, usually filled with cleaning supplies. Old paper towels, torn gloves. But this time, she pulled out a worn leather notebook, edges frayed, pages warped from old water damage, and dried flat again. The faded cover read, "Write to remember. Read to become." "Journal," she said, placing the notebook in your hands. "Every morning before class, you meet me here. Every night before bed, you write, not for grades, for understanding." You looked at the notebook like it was a foreign object. A rich kid raised on iPads and curved screen tablets. Now being handed a handwritten journal by a janitor, but your hand didn't pull back. It sat in your palm like it had been waiting there all along. "Write what?" you asked. "Write what keeps you up at night. Write what makes you squirm when you look in the mirror. Write what you never say out loud, but still whisper in your head. If you've got nothing to write, write that." You bit your lower lip. Something caught in your throat, not emotion, not doubt, just the natural resistance of someone used to trusting no one. But you still nodded. The next morning, you arrived early. Before the first school bus turned into the gate, you walked into the cold, empty hallway by the maintenance wing, the scent of disinfectant sharp in the air like metal. Evelyn was mopping like always, one earbud in, light on her feet. When she saw you, she nodded, said nothing. Like a ritual, needing no explanation. "What did you write last night?" she asked after a few minutes of quiet. You opened the journal, eyes down. "Just a few lines. Not sure it makes sense." "Read it." "Now? You waiting for an audience?" She smiled faintly. You hesitated, then read softly. "I don't know who I am without the name Reed. I don't know if I hate trying, or if I'm just afraid that even if I try, I won't be good enough. I don't know why my mom died without saying goodbye. I don't know why my dad looks at me like I'm a failed investment. I just know I'm tired and empty." The room fell silent. Evelyn said nothing. No "good job," no "that's great," no hollow praise. She simply nodded. "Then you've started." "Started what?" You asked. "A process of shedding everything you're not." They kept at it, morning after morning. You began showing up early, not because you had to, but because something inside you craved truth. No more fake glitz you were raised on. And each night you wrote. First a few lines, then pages. Evelyn didn't teach like other teachers. No handouts, no pop quizzes. She just asked questions ones no one had ever asked you. Do you ever really see other people hurting? Or just look past them? What do you think of a janitor who knows more than the principal? Have you ever cried not because you lost something, but because you realized you had nothing? And you began to answer. Not right away, but little by little. Like armor, being unbuckled. Not loud, not tragic, just change. Quiet as night wind through a cracked window. One time, writing in the empty cafeteria after school, you were caught by Josh, the star quarterback and the school's other arrogant rich kid. Look. At this, Josh laughed, filming you. Little Reed's writing a diary with the janitor. Gonna publish it? You started to stand. But Evelyn gently placed a hand on your shoulder. Don't measure depth with a shallow ruler. Josh snorted and walked off, leaving cheap laughter behind. But you didn't say a word, didn't fight, didn't flee. You just looked down and kept writing. Today, for the first time, I'm not ashamed of who's teaching me. Just ashamed that I ever thought she was beneath me. That night, you didn't sleep. At some point, you went online and searched Evelyn Wallace. You didn't expect anything. But what came up stunned, you got an old article. Faded. But the headline was clear. Professor Evelyn Wallace, the woman who refused to stay silent. Below that, a brief summary. Once a professor of literature and philosophy, Evelyn Wallace lost her post after exposing a plagiarism scandal involving the university president. The school denied it, and the media ignored it. And she disappeared. No one knows where she went. You stared at the screen. Not just a janitor. She was once a fire, and the world tried to put her out. You closed the laptop. Your hand is still resting on the lid. Something tiny, silent, but awake stirred inside you. Not pity. Not shocked, respect, if this moment hit you. Like it hit us, don't scroll past. Hit subscribe and type, I won't stay silent in the comments. Lucas began to change. Not. Instantly like a miracle. And not like in some TV show, where the main character suddenly turns good after a moral lesson. Instead, his transformation happened like water seeping into stone quiet, persistent and irreversible. He still sat in the back row of class, but he no longer kept his head down, fiddling with his phone. He started listening. It was still the same old lectures, the same teachers, but now every word seemed to carry a layer of meaning he'd never bothered to search for before. When the literature teacher spoke about a character's inner turmoil, Lucas no longer scrolled through social media, he took notes. When the history teacher talked about revolutions sparked by a single small idea, Lucas furrowed his brow and thought hard. Sometimes just a single sentence in class would prompt him to flip open the notebook Evelyn had given him and write something down, a reaction, a feeling, a question with no answer, yet that Evelyn never praised him in the usual way. She didn't say good job or well done. She simply handed back the notebook with lines of red ink. Write more honestly. Whose thoughts are these, yours, or who you think others want you to be? This sentence is pretty but hollow. Dig deeper. Lucas learned to drop his defenses. Because in Evelyn's world, there were no grades, no rewards, no stage. Only one question mattered. Do you have the courage to be honest with yourself? One day, Lucas asked her, why are you here? After everything. After the reputation, the position, the justice you tried to defend? Evelyn didn't answer right away. They were in the old library, what Evelyn called the Cathedral of Thought, a dusty, abandoned room that had become their secret classroom. She was wiping down a table, not because it was dirty, but because she believed cleaning was a form of meditation. Finally, she looked up, the dim glow of a flickering fluorescent light casting shadows across her aging cheekbones. Because I believe that sometimes, to teach someone what really matters, you have to teach them from the lowest place. Not from a podium, from the ground. When they're at rock bottom and they look up. Lucas sat in silence for a long time. For the first time, he felt something he'd never truly understood before. Humility. Not the kind taught in PowerPoint. Slides. The kind learned only through real pain. From that day on, Lucas didn't just learn for himself. He started helping his classmates. Priya, the quiet Asian girl who always sat in the front row, eyes fixed on her desk, someone Lucas had never even remembered the name of, was now sitting beside him every afternoon in the old library. They read poetry together, analyzed essays, discussed justice, identity, and the feeling of being overlooked in a system that prioritized profit and prestige over people. Then others began to show up. A black student named Malik, once suspended for fighting, now came to learn how to write arguments. Sarah, who used to skip class because she felt invisible, now sat quietly, writing down every word Evelyn said. They were students who'd been underestimated, labeled troublemakers, lazy, hopeless. But in that dusty room, they were human beings learning to rewrite themselves. Evelyn called that class the response room. Not because it protested anything, but because it taught them to respond to the world with their voices. One day, Lucas posted a quote from one of his essays on the school bulletin board. "Learning doesn't make me weak. Ignorance is what's scarce." Man, Lucas read, it was taken down the next day. But it didn't matter. It was too late. The words lived on in hallway whispers, in photos passed around group chats, and in the eyes of students who had once believed they were invisible. The kids who used to walk with their heads down were now holding them higher, seeing themselves in those words. That night, Lucas got an email from his father. Just one line. They updated your transcript. Finally decided to study? No congratulations, no recognition. Just a cold acknowledgement, like a financial report on his son. Strangely, Lucas didn't feel hurt, because he knew what he was. Doing wasn't to earn the right to exist in the Reed family. It was so that he didn't need that name to have worth. The next morning, Evelyn handed Lucas a book. Its cover was worn, the edges swollen like they'd soaked up tears. The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. She didn't explain. She just said, "This book saved me when I thought I had nothing left to hold on to." Lucas read it like every sentence was a foundation stone rebuilding his soul. He underlined passages that made his heart ache like reopening old wounds. He took notes, challenged ideas, poured feelings into his journal, not to turn in, but to hold on to himself every time he felt lost again, and to find space for the questions no one had ever taught him how to ask. And of course, there were those who couldn't stand the change. Josh and his friends started mocking Lucas again. They stood outside the cafeteria, phones in hand, laughter dripping like damp gunpowder. Look at that. Little Richie Rich Reed wiping boards with the janitor. Book deal coming soon? Lucas clenched his notebook, face flushed red. But Evelyn, without looking up, turned to a fresh page and said while writing, "People afraid of change are often the ones who've never had to rebuild themselves from the rubble. No need to fight back. No need to stoop to anyone's level." Her words like a velvet-wrapped punch hit straight to the soul. The secret classroom continued. No registration forms. No report cards. No funding. But every day, another forgotten kid found their way back to themselves. They didn't come because Evelyn was a professor. They came because she saw the part of them they hid best and didn't judge it. Until one rainy October afternoon, everything came to a halt. Evelyn was called into the principal's office. The reason: a parent has complained about you running an unofficial class. The sentence was unspoken. No one questioned it. Evelyn walked out, back straight, no argument, no tears. When the principal asked, "Do you have anything to say before we escalate this to the board?" she simply replied, "Nowhere in my job description does it say I have to save a child, but I did it every day." She left the office the way she'd entered Lucas's life, not loud, but leaving a void nothing could fill. That night, Lucas got the news. He sat down on the floor in front of the old library door. His notebook fell from his hands. The blank, pages soaked in rain. But this time, his eyes didn't hold helplessness. They held something else: resolve. While gathering the remaining books from the old classroom, Lucas found a sealed envelope with his name on it, written in Evelyn's slanted handwriting. He opened it. Inside was a copy of the same old article he'd once found, a scandal that had cost Evelyn her career. But along with it was a small slip of paper containing only one line: "I didn't lose my job because I was wrong. I lost it because I was right too soon." On the day Evelyn stopped showing up at school, no one mentioned her name. There was no announcement, no farewell, not a rushed email or a memorial post. Just an absence so silent it felt like the air itself had lost its breath. Like when a painting is taken off the wall and leaves behind a strange white space. No one says anything, but everyone feels the void. Lucas knew. But this time, he didn't stay silent. He didn't just sit back and wait for someone else to act like he used to. Every morning after that, he still came to the old library. He still wiped down the desk where Evelyn used to sit. He still opened his notebook and wrote, even though no one was marking his grammar or underlining empty lines in red. But Lucas's pen didn't weaken. It got bolder, firmer, because now he wasn't writing for grades, for Evelyn, or for his father. He was writing to keep the fire inside from being blown out by the wind outside. Then the announcement appeared. On the bulletin board, end-of-year speech contest. Theme: what does it mean to win in life? Lucas stared at those words, rain dripping down his hair, his shirt soaked through. Then he tore the page down and slipped it into his bag. He knew this was the moment Evelyn had talked about, the moment when his voice would have to be strong, enough to stand without a name holding it up. In the days that followed, Lucas wrote through the nights. He flipped through his notebook, revisiting every note Evelyn had ever challenged, every question left unanswered. Are you studying because you're afraid to lose? Or because you want to know who you really are? If no one's watching, would you still try? Whose voice are you living by, yours, or the expectations others have piled onto you? Since you were a kid, Lucas wrote. He wrote like he was dissecting and rebuilding himself. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't a PR piece for the read name. It was a birth certificate for someone new. He wrote about Evelyn, about truth, about how the system had silenced so many voices for being the wrong thing at the wrong time in the wrong body. He wrote for students like Malik, like Priya, like himself, kids who were labeled failures before they'd even had a chance to understand who they were. The auditorium was bright, every seat filled. Parents sat neatly in silver gray suits, the lights glinting off their well-oiled hair. Students whispered nervously, and teachers nodded along to prepared scripts. Lucas sat backstage. No suit like the others. Just a deep blue shirt, slacks, and Evelyn's old notebook in his hands. The only thing that made him feel guided. His name was called. Lucas walked out onto the stage. The spotlight hit his eyes. The entire room fell silent. He took a long breath, not to build courage, but to shed the last layer of who he'd been. Then he began, his voice low, steady, unwavering. My name is Lucas Reed. Some of you know me as the son of Charles Reed. Some of you know me as the kid who once claimed he could buy this school just because he could. But today, I'm not standing here as a Reed. I'm standing here as someone who once failed, not because I was stupid, but because no one ever tried to teach me in a way I could understand. And then someone did. Not in a classroom, but in a hallway that smelled of bleach, beside a rusted supply cart. She didn't have an office, no nameplate, just a mop and a mind this school chose to ignore. She was a janitor, but she was also a professor, a woman who lost everything for telling the truth before the world was ready to hear it. The first person who made me feel truly seen. She didn't teach me how to win. She taught me what winning actually means. It's not medals, titles, or sports cars. It's being able to look at yourself when there's nothing left to show off. It's choosing to learn from zero, choosing to fail, choosing to rewrite yourself in the language of truth, not the language of expectation. Lucas paused. The air in the auditorium felt heavy as stone. Then he pulled the notebook from his pocket and held it up. Winning in life isn't standing at the top. It's standing up from the place where people assumed you'd already died inside. And if any of you still doubt that, go find Evelyn Wallace, if you even remember that name. She no longer mops these floors, but she's the one who taught me to stand on this stage without bowing my head to any name, not even my own. Silence, then applause, then more, then a standing ovation, then tears. No one had to be told, but something heavy had just lifted from the cold ceiling of that school dot at the back of the auditorium. A woman in a knit hat and worn coat stood quietly in the shadows. She didn't cry, but her eyes were wet. She looked at Lucas and nodded gently. Evelyn had come, not as someone returning, but as someone bearing witness. The following week, Lucas received acceptance letters from 3 universities. One was an elite Ivy League. 2 were smaller, one of them specialized in education and sociology. He chose the 3rd. When asked why, he simply said, I don't just want to study. I want to learn so I can teach. Lucas and Evelyn, after a few quiet coffees at a small shop at the end of the street, decided to create a new learning space, the Evelyn Institute, a place where kids once labeled trouble could write, read, speak, and think as themselves. No report cards, no uniforms, no expectations, just truth. Charles Reed, the father Lucas once wanted to impress, once wanted to surpass, came to the Institute's opening. He stood in the back row, watching quietly. After the ceremony, He approached. Lucas. His voice was rough, like gravel in his throat. I didn't think you'd pull this off. Lucas replied, his eyes calm. Neither did I, until someone taught me how to believe in myself. They didn't hug. They didn't cry. But the distance between the two men grew smaller, not through words, but through a quiet acknowledgement. I've become someone else, and that is victory. Thanks for staying until the end. If this story moved you even a little, click subscribe, not just for us, but for every voice like Evelyn's.